Mas Ainur apa sudah dimulai itu, Mas? Halo, halo. Mas Ainur atau operator?
Berarti dari siapa?
This conference provides the forum for understanding the concept of linguistic science of processing language.
Today, the Studium Generale 2023 is attended by our respectable lecturers and guests, and also the students of English Department, Faculty of Letters, Universitas Negeri Malang in the year of 2023.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed, allow us to introduce you to today's agenda, which begins with the opening prayer and continues with singing of the Indonesian national anthem.
Second, the official opening remarks by the head of English Department.
Third, photo session.
Fourth, presentation session followed by question and answer session.
And the last is closing.
Ladies and gentlemen, proceeding to our first agenda, I'd like to invite each of you to take a moment for personal reflection and prayer that aligns with your beliefs. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we move to the next agenda, we would like to invite you to sing the Indonesian national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Please rise from your seats. Please be seated.
The next agenda will be the opening remarks that will be delivered by the head of English Department, Universitas Negeri Malang, Dr. Suharyadi. Dr. Suharyadi, we are honored to welcome you.
Yes. All right. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, Ibu Bapak. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you today? Fine. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much. The Honorable Keynote Speaker, Professor Clay Williams, thank you so much for joining, for having this session with our students and also with our faculty members. So thank you again so much for this. And then we would like also to address the faculty members of the Department of English. We have several of them are here. We have Professor Nur Mukminatin, and then we have also Pak Kuku, and then Bu Ide Laksmi, and then team of the IC, and of course we have the Pak. Hello, Prof. Yeah. So we have the moderator, Pak Heki, and also Bu Sinta, Bu Yvonne, who are preparing this session very well today. So thank you so much for making this event possible. And all of the participants, the students, very special for today's session, students of the English department from English language education and also English language literature. And they are so special too because they are not from seniors, but very special from, where is it, from the cohort 2023. And they are very happy to be here. Hopefully you can get information, you can get knowledge, and then also information from Professor Clay. If you look at the topic, it is about linguistics, science. How does language work? Hopefully this is very useful and you can get a lot of information. And then I would like to also address the committee members who have prepared this. Hopefully today's session is going to be smooth, no problems from the beginning to the end. So again, thank you so much. And also the MC, thank you so much for helping us. That's all from me. Thank you so much. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you for Dr. Suharyadi who has opened this event. We express our gratitude.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we are moving to the next agenda, which is a photo session. For the person in charge, I over to you.
For the sessions. So we will take a picture together on the lectures.
So in front.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving along to our next agenda, which is the presentation that will be delivered by Professor Clay H. William and followed by question and answer session.
This session will be guided by our amazing moderator, Dr. Ahmad Heki Sujiatmoko. To Dr. Ahmad Heki, we gladly hand this over to you.
Testing. Okay, well, thank you, Bima and Adria. Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Honorable Dean of English Department, Dr. Suryadi, our lecturers and students, welcome and thank you for coming to this building. Today, we are going to have a Studium Generale or seminar entitled Linguistic Science, How the Brain Works or Processes for the Language. This seminar is aimed at giving you the basic information about the process of the brain for thinking or understanding or even learning about the language. So that's why this is good for you. And this is something important, especially for you as the new students who want to learn about the language. So would you like to pay attention to everything that will be explained by Professor William? Yeah. Okay, introducing, I am Ahmad Heki Sujiatmoko. I will be the moderator for this seminar. To make this seminar be more fantastic, so we have an amazing keynote speaker, Professor Clay Williams. Okay, hello, Professor Clay, how are you?
I am doing well. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, thank you. So is it the first time for you to come to Indonesia? Or?
No, this is my second time,
Second
only
time.
my second time.
Okay, good. Wow, this will be something amazing that you come to this campus, especially in Indonesia. Okay, okay. Well, before we start the seminar, I would like to read Professor Clay's profile for you. Yeah, and this is something amazing to be known by you. Professor Clay William is a professor from Akita International University, Japan. And then his expertise is concerned with many things, for example, like psycholinguistics, research writing, and then applied linguistics. Yeah. So this is concerned with the linguistic commonly. Yeah. Wow, this is something amazing to be understood because English cannot be separated from understanding the linguistics. Okay, and then Professor Clay has also won the awards, and one of the awards coming to this year in 2023, that is supposed to be Erasmus Mobility Grant, 1 week travel grant for teaching cooperation with the University of Pix, Hungary. Wow, this is something amazing. Okay, so to shorten the time, I think I will tell you about the regulation about this seminar. So there will be 2 sessions. The first session will be about the presentation that will be done or given by Professor Clay. And then the second session will be the question and answer sessions. And remember, you know, students, there will be the door prize for you if you want to ask the questions. Yeah. So would you like to pay attention to the explanation given by Professor Clay? Then you can ask various kinds of questions. And hopefully that the questions can be something important for you all for understanding better about the language. Okay, well, I think we have to start now. So I invite Professor Clay to do the presentation. Professor Clay, the time is yours.
See, I'm gonna drift over here so that I can glance at the screen as we go along. And also, who is controlling the PowerPoint during this? Is that back there? Okay, I just need to know who to talk to when we go slide by slide. But please. Next.
Excuse me, can you give Professor Clay the clicker?
Yeah, that would actually be ideal. Okay, so give me 1 second.
Okay.
This is a huge screen. It's gonna be easier if I have something to look at here. Okay. So you are English majors, am I right in that?
Yeah.
Yay. Now, presumably, you spend a lot of your day, each day, a lot of your time here at studying foreign language. And oftentimes you're taking grammar classes. How many of you want to be teachers? It's a lot of you. Huh. You do know what they pay teachers, right? And you still want to be teachers? Well, good for you. Now, we can take classes on how to teach language, how to learn language, but when we consider the phenomenon, which is human language, there are actually more ambitious questions that we can ask ourselves, such as, how do we understand language? How do we produce language? Now, have you ever thought this stuff on a day-to-day basis? Okay. How does language work? Where is it in your brain? Like, where's the word cat? Point to the word cat in your brain. Yeah, I don't know either. Where do we keep specific words? Where do we keep language faculties in general? And how, for example, is native language and foreign language represented in the brain? Is it similar? Is it completely different? All of this type of stuff is what psycholinguistic research attempts to grapple with. Slide, please. So the way we represent knowledge is actually a matter of huge debate. Yeah, now just kind of cut to the chase. The amount that we know about how the brain works is itty bitty. It's not, we don't have very in-depth knowledge of what's happening up here. But we typically...
Louder, staticier, but you can hear me? All right. Now, how do we know what we know? Weird sentence, I know. But how do we know what we know? Well, this is actually a very complex thing, which gets into cognitive processes, perceptual processes, etc. For example, click. And if there is a clicker,
yeah, please, would you like to give
very
clicker?
good. Okay. Dog. I don't think that's a surprise to you, right? Oh, click. The thing is, these are also dogs. And dogs can look very different. I usually put it to my students as I'm not sure if Chihuahuas should be classified as dogs. Let's be honest. Even if you have a Chihuahua, you can admit they look more like rats than like, say a Labrador or a Golden Retriever, right? So how do we have this mental concept of dog? Click. What makes a dog, in other words? And how do we recognize that? Because even small children do. Now, we have to represent knowledge in terms of our visual perception in order to recognize things for what they are. We can take all sorts of examples, think of how many types of trees there are, but we know they're trees. So let's take a cow, for example. How do we have the knowledge of what a cow looks like? How do we recognize it when we see it? So what knowledge is necessary? Okay, we can think in terms of size. We can think in terms of cow shape, cow colors. I know of officially 2 color schemes for cows. There's probably more. Proportions, etc. And how do we store that knowledge? Is it image, text? Is it abstract knowledge? Now, you have a little cow there, but click, click. Okay, what is that? How do you know? Is it shaped like a cow? No. Now, the thing is, we can see some parts of the cow. He's partially hidden, but we know what it is. Why do we know that? Well, how much do we need to know? For example, if you could just see the foot sticking out there, would you know it's a cow? Now, I grew up amongst cow farmers, and I bet most of them would know that that's a cow. So your general experience is going to be part of this. What about, now, I can guarantee you've never seen a cow that looked like that. That would entail horrible accident, right? Now, we can still do this. Obviously, we have the ability to playing musical microphones here.
Thank you.
Try this one. You said the same thing for the last change. Yeah. Now, ultimately, we have to think in terms of what is going to allow us to distinguish that cow from some other object. And what visual stimulus is going to assert cowness to us? How much cow stimulus does it take? Because, again, some people, might see the foot or part of an ear and know there's a cow behind that sign. Most of us probably need a bit more, but we don't need that much. Now, is object recognition just pattern matching? Well, we obviously, from the aforementioned example, we don't need the whole object to match things. So are we just recognizing parts? And do we recognize parts before we recognize the whole? These are the sorts of questions that really should keep us up at night, but I don't recommend thinking about this on your way to sleep, okay? These are the sorts of things that we really do not have clear answers for. Just the basics of how do we know that a cow is a cow? We don't know that much, but click. When we get into language, language is actually even more complex because language is symbolic. Okay? Cows are quite literal, right? It's a concrete thing that we can recognize, but words are not concrete. The sound is a physical entity, but most words, in fact, all words, have nothing to do with what they represent. Okay? Why do we call cow cow? Any ideas? Why is the name cow? What is cow in Bahasa? Why is it that? My friends in France will say la vache. In Japan, they are firmly convinced that that's called ushi. China, so on and so forth. So there's no real reason to call things what we call them. It's just a matter of we make a social agreement. We agree that this is the label we're going to give to this concept. And that agreement allows us to use language. But every word you know is purely symbolic. And even the ones that you think, oh, well, that's really the sound. Like in Indonesian, what does a dog say? Anjing? What? So, we can think in terms of each word we know. There's a whole lot of information embedded there. So, let's see. Oh, next slide. I thought we were already there. The word childish. So, childish, we can know the morphemes, child and ish. We can know that this is an adjective. We can know the phonemes involved, the pronunciation of the word. We might know how to spell it. Now, if you're like me, your knowledge of English spelling might be somewhat suspect. I'm a horrible speller, but we learn that sort of stuff. We learn what it means, displaying immature behavior. Next slide, please. But language, of course, is a lot more than just vocabulary. If you memorize a dictionary, you do not speak the language yet. And plus, you probably spent a lot of very, very boring time, just saying. It's the principles and rules that govern how we put those words together that really form the language. We can simplify this in terms of syntax, but it really actually plays across syntax and its relationship with phonology and morphology and all that good stuff that you get in linguistics classes. But we know a lot of stuff that you don't really even know you know. For example, adjectives like tall, they either precede the noun within a noun phrase or follow a copula. Who knows that rule? Yeah, you probably have never heard it stated as a rule like that before, right? But you all know how to use the word tall. Exactly. Yeah. And actually, if you ask stuff like this to native speakers, they will never, ever know. They will, in your native language, you never know the rule. You just know how to talk. So speakers of English know this stuff. It has to be represented in their brains in some way. Next. What about if you have multiple languages, which everyone in this room does? Yay. So how do you store two different language systems? Now, ostensibly, there's exactly three possibilities of how this goes. You know, we can just kind of think logically that either language one and language two are stored together, or they're stored separately, or you're accessing one through the other. That's logically about the only thing you can get. Now, none of this stuff is 100% certain, but there is actually very good evidence which suggests that all three of these are happening, albeit in different people, in different language scenarios. Typically, storing the two languages together, this happens for people who grow up as multilinguals. They grow up speaking more than one language. So yeah, I'll point to my children. You know, they are growing up with three languages in the house, and their brains probably just mash everything together. Now, I'm on the other side here because for storing separately, this tends to happen if you learn the second language later. Now, I was monolingual English speaker until I was about 11 or 12 years old. And so I'm definitely psychologically speaking in this category of the languages that I speak are just apart from English. So very, very clear difference between them. And then this last category is when you are first learning a language, when you're at a low proficiency level, there are ways of measuring that, you know, one is accessing the second language through the first language. Put another way, it means we can't go from the second language form directly to the concepts in your head. So, you know, say, you know, if I'm studying Bahasa and you know, you teach me the word for dog, and then someone says the word for dog, I'm not going to immediately go from that word to my mental concept of dog. I'm going to translate it into English and then go to dog from there. That's what that means. But over time, with practice, I am able to shorten the process and go directly from the Bahasa word to the concepts in my brain. Which leads to that final note that these are not necessarily fixed concepts. So then how do we access this knowledge? If it's all up here, what do we do? Like, because obviously, you know, even just the thought of accessing a word is not what we do. We are accessing speech in real time. We talk typically very, very quickly. Some people faster than others. I'm actually a very slow speaker, which, you know, a lot of students of English really appreciate. But if you think I am speaking slowly, it's not because I am slowing down for you. This is how I talk. Where I grew up, people speak slowly. But ultimately, we have to understand several words per second and fit them into syntactic slots in order to get the meanings of sentences in real time as people are speaking, as we are coming up with our responses. And the only reason why we don't think of this as just a God-given miracle and amazing thing is the fact that we do it so naturally and so well. So ultimately, this is where the question comes in. How do we manage this superhuman feat of understanding language? Well, it's intuitive to say that we would have to start with sounds. I need to recognize the sounds, match up those sounds, and come up with the words being spoken. So knowledge of the language sound system is going to be necessary. Let's see, I think we're a couple slides on. Next one. Okay. So let's take the example of b sounds and p sounds. We're going to see several things with that as our basic example. They are contrastive in English. I believe they're contrastive in Indonesian as well, meaning that you can make different word by substituting those two sounds. There are certain variants upon these sounds for sure. Within English, for example, the p sound in, say, pin is completely different from the p sound in spin. Okay? The first one has a puff of air to it, the second one does not. But whereas some languages, that would be contrastive, that would be the difference between two sounds. For example, in my wife's native language of Mandarin Chinese, that's a sound difference. In English, it is not. These specific sounds come up in certain phonetic environments. There are rules around it, but if you mess it up, we still hear the right word by and large. And basically, these sounds that we produce in language are perceived as being very, very different within the context of any certain language. Okay. Next. Different languages have different possibilities for combining these sounds. Now, this can actually help us towards establishing what's being spoken as well, because there's going to be certain combinatorial possibilities within languages. Now, we know this mainly in terms of what you can't do in languages. These are phonotactic constraints, these rules of where to put sounds, like English can go pla, blah, cla, gla, sla, etc. But we can't do things like vr. Whereas in French, we have no problem. C'est vrai. And even where sounds go, the ng sound exists in Indonesian, it exists in my language, but you can put it at the front of words. Oh, I can't. All of these sorts of constraints can help to recognize words in speech context. So, think in terms of like Matt leaps and Ross leaps versus Matt sleeps and Ross sleeps. Now, the second one, Ross leaps, Ross sleeps. Anyone hearing the same thing there? How about stuff like a notion, a notion? One of them is the C. The other is an idea. These might get a little difficult to hear, but there are actually rules behind how they're produced, which help speakers of the language to distinguish them. So first, next please, get to the next slide. First, let's consider speech production. How do we make these sounds? Now, what is speech at its root? Well, basically vibrated air. That's all it is. Now, years and years and years ago, I read an interview with a famous guitarist. I used to teach guitar for a living. And this guitarist was saying, well, if you look inside a speaker, you just see a big paper cone. Okay? That's what these speakers are. They are paper cones, which they vibrate that cone, and that produces very, very large sound. And this guitarist was correctly pointing out that if you knew how to do it, you could go on stage with a sheet of paper, and by moving that paper in the right way, you could reproduce the entire concert, because that's all sound is a matter of vibrating air. We happen to do it by noisy breathing, right? Because all I'm doing right now is breathing out while controlling it to make different sounds. Okay. If we look at the vocal track, next. Beautiful. Essentially, we have all sorts of tools at our disposal for vibrating, restricting, and controlling that air. And that enables all of the various sounds that we use in every human language. I don't think that's going to be visible. Okay. Now, we can probably skip the next few. Skip. Okay. Won't get into spectrographic data here, but producing any word or sentence is just a sequence of motor commands that you are producing. So, you're drawing the vocal folds together, moving the tongue this way and that, moving the lips, possibly sending the air either through the nose, or you could be stopping it at any point along the articulators, or you could be just reducing the escape velocity to where there's friction. All of this produces sounds. And the thing is, we change from sound to sound. You take a basic word like cat, k, a, t. We say this fast, and there is inertia in how we're moving our mouths. And the result comes up with the first major confound, the first major problem we have in describing how we actually understand language is this: co-articulation. Now, what is co-articulation? Well, basically for the speaker, this inertia of, if I'm going from one sound to the other, I'm going to be speaking through it while moving my tongue and my teeth. And it basically, it changes the nature of the sound. It makes it easier to say, but it does change the task of hearing. So, for example, that k, a, t, cat. If I say cat, or let's go with something a little easier, bat, bat, bet, bit, bot, but. I can get all the vowels there. Now, you would probably listen to that and say, okay, the vowel is different in each case, but the b sound and the t sound are the same. And you would be incorrect. The b sound and the t sound are completely distinct in each case. Bat, bet. Now, the the more I open my jaw for the S sound, it changes the quality of that B sound. So we don't have a B sound. You don't have one B in your brain. You have a B combined with everything that can go before and after it. You have B sounds coming from me and coming from everybody else in this room, because our vocal tracts, all of different size and slightly different shape, produce qualitatively distinctive voices. This is why when your friend calls you on the phone, hello, you know who it is. So we can't just have a sound and call it a day. You have to be prepared to recognize thousands upon thousands of variants of that same sound. Ooh, this gets complicated, doesn't it? Now, next. And some of these sounds, the actual difference between them is very, very fine-tuned. So s versus sh. The only real difference between these two is one of frequency. Okay. S, sh. Which one is higher? S, sh. You can hear the drop off there. Now, what this produces is, lots of opportunities for mistakes, first of all. But we have to have a tremendously fine-tuned system to hear differences such as that. Next slide, please. Basically, we need to acknowledge a couple of major problems for speech perception. First of all, the segmentation problem, that each segment of speech is carrying lots of information. It's more than just that one segment. It's taking on characteristics of what's before and after. And then the lack of invariance. We actually are very, very specific in terms of searching for features of the sound. And any theory, any ideas of how we do this have to take that all into account. Now, there's something, next slide, called categorical perception, which kind of exposes this latter issue. Essentially, this comes down to, let me back up and just say, when you tell people, oh, there's thousands of variants of these sounds, the next very intuitive thought that you would have is, is that these sounds must operate on a spectrum. That, like from here to here, I'm going to hear it as s, and from here to here, I'm going to hear it as sh. That builds in lots of variation. And the problem is, we are actually incredibly precise about this, and we don't allow for that much variation to the actual sound. We allow for variation of voices. We allow we recognize the sounds with all of these combinations. But when you talk about the actual physical features of the sound, we are very inflexible. This is categorical perception. Now, I'm going to give you a little example of this. If you go a couple slides further. Next. Okay, can you play the sounds from 1 to 9 in order? And hopefully this is plugged into sound. If it's not,
Pa. Pa.
Maybe a little louder.
Pa.
Now, do you hear pa or ba? Now, let me put it this way. We're going to go in order. Listen carefully, because I'm not sure how loud they can get that. But
Pa.
when you hear a B sound, raise your hand.
Pa. 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 Ba. Ba.
Where did you hear the B sound? That tends to be the case. As you can see on this chart, this functions across languages. Humans hear that shift in sound usually between 20 and 30 milliseconds of voice onset time. This is the duration of silence before the vocal folds start to vibrate. It's very, very precise. Anything before that is going to be misidentified. Now, if that voice onset time is shorter than 30 milliseconds, then people start hearing the B sound. This is categorical perception. that sort of precision. Now, 30 milliseconds, that's 30/1000ths of a second, is all the allowance we give ourselves for hearing the difference between two very similar sounds. And this sort of phenomenon goes on across all languages. Now, next, and next. So another thing that we have to take into account for models of speech perception, we are visual listeners, so to speak. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that we watch each other's faces while we are speaking, while we are talking, and we do so a lot more so than generally we give ourselves credit for. Now, let me put this in the easy way. Have you noticed now, particularly if you do this in English or another foreign language, when you talk on the phone, it's much harder than talking face to face. Who has had that experience? Even in your native language, it is kind of harder to tell what's going on the phone. Why? Why? Well, we don't have the context. We don't know how people are moving their bodies. We don't know what their face looks like. We don't see facial expressions. And so oftentimes we can misread intention. But even more basic than that is the fact that if we do not see their mouths, we can misidentify sound because we tend to be very, very reliant upon it. Now, obviously, blind people and the fact that we can close our eyes, we can hear things without looking at people, but we're just not as good at it. Now, next slide. I don't know if this video embed is going to play or not. We can try, but there is something called the McGurk effect. I have a little example.
Watch this experiment. It's called the McGurk effect.
Ba, 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 ba.
What do you think he's saying? If you think he's saying da, 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 you are in the grand majority. But now, close your eyes and listen instead of watching.
Try closing your eyes and opening your eyes.
Ba, 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 ba.
The voice is saying ba, ba, ba. Now, let's replay it without the sound. Yes, it's true. His lips are saying ga, ga, ga. So how is it that when the lips are saying ga, 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 and the sound says ba, 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 that our brains read da, da, da? The McGurk effect. It's an example of an auditory illusion. It's a great way to show that the accurate perception of information can involve the participation of more than one sensory system. In this case, vision with sound. We call it multimodal perception. The McGurk effect. It's a terrific example of the fact that the senses did not evolve in isolation from each other, but actually work together to help us perceive our world. When multiple senses are stimulated simultaneously, the brain begins to experience an information-rich learning experience and laps it up like ice cream. It encodes more information per unit time, and it remembers that information.
Okay. Now, McGurk effect is actually very well studied. We've known about it for quite a long time, but it's a lot of fun. And it's produced by just mismatched video and audio. The poor man's version of this is, if you're watching something online with, a low download rate, and the audio gets ahead of the video, and it drives you crazy, right? A lot of this is part of it. We expect to have some match between what we're hearing and what we're seeing. And when there's the mismatch, we can even mishear it because we are factoring in that visual information. Next slide. So the McGurk effect is actually incredibly general. Every language they've ever tested it on, which by now is hundreds, it works. It seems to be quite universal. It works on infants even. And in the case of blind people, like touching the lips, it works on that too. It just seems to be a human universal that we are multimodal listeners, say, that language, we are taking more than one mode of perception into account with what we think we're hearing. Now, this gets into the next little interesting question that comes about. Now, I'll give you a little background here that the question comes about because of some of the theories that were proffered towards explaining how we deal with this incredibly mutable sound system and the fact that we have to see it. There was some thought that perhaps because we learn language, we kind of reverse engineer it in our brains. And we know how to make a ba sound, we know how to make a da sound, we know what that should look like. And so we know what we're looking for. And this caused researchers to claim that this would be human exclusive behavior. But that's been tested. Haha. This is honestly one of the coolest experiments I've ever seen. Okay. And not just because I like chinchillas, but I like chinchillas. Do animals distinguish sounds the same way we do? Now, this would go far in determining whether this is a human-specific psychological effect or if this is an effect of the sound itself. So, if this is human-specific, then we would not expect chinchillas to have the same effects to sound that we do. Okay. Now, we saw before that, sounds like pa and ba, it's between the 20 and 30 millisecond spot that English speakers particularly, but generally most languages that distinguish those two phonemes are going to hear the difference at, let's call it the 25 millisecond voice onset time mark. Now, go to the next one. If animals had non-categorical perception, it would look somewhat like this. Yeah, it would just be, gradual fading from one to the next. Now, of course, the immediate question is, well, how do we ask animals about this? Dog, when do you hear pa and when do you hear ba? Not the best research technique, but next slide, please. Back in 1978, this goes way back, they did something ingenious. They trained chinchillas with pa and ba sounds. And the basic command was, if we say pa, come up here, get a treat. If we say ba, go down there, get a treat. Okay, next slide. Now, they gave the chinchillas essentially the same test you just listened to, the pa, 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 ba. And what happened? Well, we're not that special. Chinchillas heard the difference at the exact same point that we did, which suggests that these distinctions in sounds are acoustic in nature. It's something which we notice, but we don't create it. We don't create the distinction in our brain. There is a physical distinction that we are able to notice. next, and next. Oh, let me check back in terms of what time was that? 10 minutes. Okay. I was last week just told a couple hours, so I've got way too much stuff. So I'm not gonna take up your whole afternoon. I just want to make sure where's a good stopping point. But in terms of other things that we have to fit into this idea of how do we actually even just determine the words? How do we determine the sounds? Yet another weird human trick is the phoneme restoration effect. Anyone ever heard of this one? I've seen some references to this in like media and larger culture. There's a chance that people know this, but basically we have this weird little tick to our brains that allows us, if a phoneme is missing from a word, if there's a missing sound, if that missing part is covered up by something like a cough or a sneeze, you will hear the sound. It doesn't even exist, but you will swear that you heard it. Now, there are certain restrictions to this. It has to be something like a cough or a sneeze or background noise. It has to be some sort of mouth sound, in other words. If you have like, computer beep, 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 or car horns, that doesn't do it. Then we just notice the missing sound. But if there is like someone coughs and you don't hear a sound, you still hear the sound, is what that comes down to. Can you please play the audio file here?
The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city. The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city. The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city. The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city.
Okay, anybody pick out the sentence? I know the volume was low. The state governor met with their respective legislatures. Now, key word there is legislatures. Because now I'm going to ask them to play it again. Pay attention just to that word. That's where you hear the little cough. But listen to that word legislatures and see if you notice anything about it. One more time, please. Yeah.
The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city. The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city. The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city.
Okay.
The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital
weird
city.
In any way? Legislatures? Here's the thing. That S sound did not exist. It is not in the file. It was digitally removed. But you still heard it. I still heard it because your brain just turned that little cough into the S sound. Now, how do we do this? Why do we do this? Well, this is obviously top down. This is using your vocabulary knowledge. If this were in a foreign language, you would not have the effect. Or a foreign language that you did not know, say. But ultimately, your brain is adapted for all sorts of just crazy feats of daring do for using language. So next, I do want to hit this one. So, I've teased this, with all these problems with just recognizing sounds, how do we distinguish words? Well, it turns out that different languages are going to have different strategies towards isolating the words in sentences. When I speak a sentence, this is all just one big sound, right? I do not pause between words, usually. When I speak normally, it all comes out as one sound. The only thing that is causing you to hear different words is the fact that you know the system. You have learned how to isolate those words. But how do we do it? Well, we actually do not have a one-size-fits-all manner of speech processing as humans. Languages, now, lots of languages will have the same sorts of strategies, mind you. It's not like every language is something completely different, but we have several different strategies. And this can impact your ability to learn in another language. So for example, in French, and while I do not have any data on Bahasa Indonesia, I strongly suspect that Indonesian can do this as well. They use a syllable segmentation strategy. It means that this gets around that first problem of having 15,000 different sounds. If you, instead of storing in your brain b, a, and t, if you store syllables, all of that co-articulation is already factored in. And languages that have clear syllable segments can do this, and largely do this. Now, English, we're special because English is hard to split into syllables. Take a word like balance. Is it bal and ants or ba and lance? Which syllables are they? I don't know either. And this is my native language. Because we can do either way. There's no set syllable forms in a lot of English words because we have a lot more consonantal combination possibility in a lot of languages. This means in English, phonotactic boundaries. Now, this is things like if you hear a ng sound, I know I'm at the end of the syllable. The only thing that can come after ng is the S marker, like rings. And in addition, languages tend to have backup strategies. We don't get by with just one strategy for hearing the words in a sentence. English uses word stress as a backup strategy. Now, I'll probably close with this, and then we'll move into the question and answer. But let me just tell you a little story of how these backup strategies come into play. In the backup strategies for figuring out sounds and thus the words in English or any language are typically going to be employed in what is called degraded speech environments. To you and me, that means when you're at a noisy place, when you're at a party, when you're at a noisy restaurant, and you can barely hear the person talking to you, you actually turn on backup strategies in order to understand speech. So in the case of English, word stress suddenly becomes very, very important when you're in a noisy place.
I'm sorry, Prof.
Now, let me just give an example of the impact of this word stress. A very dear friend of mine, he is Chinese. He has lived in the US for over 20 years at this point. He speaks English very, very fluently, but he has a Chinese accent. And he one day was telling me he had gone to a wedding with some friends, and they went to a restaurant, and he tried to order a beer, a brand called Blue Moon. And the waiter brought him a Reuben sandwich instead. And he was very upset. He thought, how dumb are you? You gave me, I order a Blue Moon and you give me a Reuben sandwich. And he yelled at the waiter. And when he's telling the story, I just start laughing at him because I knew exactly what went wrong. Because my friend was, when he was telling me this story, he said, he did not say, I ordered a blue moon. He said, I ordered a blue moon. He put the stress on the first. Should be at the end. And in that noisy restaurant, that was enough that the waiter is hearing an accent. He's hearing stress in the wrong place. My friend got the wrong thing. Now, this is where these sorts of phonological contexts can really come and cause problems. Be aware. Anyway, that's kind of my public service announcement of pay attention to word stress when you're studying vocabulary. But we are at the period. So now is question and answer. Okay, so I will stop right there, and we can we'll open it up to questions. I really look forward to hearing your questions.
Applause, please. Well, so that is amazing presentation that has been given by Professor Gray. Please, for the students, this is the time for you to give the questions because this is a question and answer sessions. There will be the door prize that will be given to you if you ask some questions to Professor Gray concerning about the materials that has been explained to you. Come on, would you like to open the questions? Yeah, over there. Okay, before you ask about the questions, would you like to mention the name of yours? Yeah, okay, come on.
Test. Okay. Hello, sir. Greeting to you. Good afternoon.
Okay, what's your name?
I am Steve from
Steve?
the Language and Literature Department of the,
What offering, Steve?
offering H.
H.
We talk about understanding sound as an important aspect to understand English. Like for hearing is really good. But I actually have a question. What about a different accent? English have like a lot of accents, right? Such like American accents, like Aussie accents, like British accents, etc. So how can we understand which one is the proper English by the sound of the accent? That's it. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, well, thank you. Do you want to answer
course.
directly or we need more questions?
Huh?
You want to answer directly or?
I'll go one at a time.
Okay, I give you 2 more questions, please. Come on. The chance for asking about 2 more questions.
I'll just field that one first.
Oh, you want to answer? Okay.
While it's on everybody's brain. It is important to consider the multitudinous accents that are out there. And I'm frequently asked, like, which one should I study? Now, of course, my own bias is study my accent. My gosh. But no. Essentially, the problem in speech perception even extends towards native speakers. So you're not alone in this. For example, my mother loves watching, British dramas on TV. My dad can't stand it because he can't understand a word they're saying. I once knew a guy from Ireland, and the only way we could communicate was to speak French. He couldn't understand me. I couldn't understand him in English. In French, we were fine. It's a big world. Now, in terms of what you do, well, the sound changes, say, British to American English, not to mention Australian, are so profoundly different that I usually advise students to pick one. The simple fact is, there's no way that you are at least easily going to train yourself to understand all of them and to speak all of them. Pick one and pick it based off of, where you think life is going to take you in terms of your usage. If you have the chance to study abroad, if you have the chance to, deal with speakers of a particular dialect, be open to the fact that life might take you on an alternative route, and you may prepare for England and show up in America and go, oh no, but you will adapt. Just like every American who goes to England, just like every Aussie who goes to Ireland, we have to be flexible. I'm sure even traveling in Indonesia, it's going to get hairy sometimes. But it's all just a matter of how familiar you are with them. But the best thing to do as a student is just pick a lane, choose one, and pursue that to the best of your ability.
Okay, well, thank you for the answers, Professor Gray. So there are many accents in English, so that's why you can choose one of them. Yeah, you can choose British English, American English. The most important thing is that you are able to apply, because you understand how to speak or pronounce English words very well. Thank you. Okay, now we go to the next question. Who wants to ask? Come on.
Hello, sir. My name is Halet Queen Alusia. I'm from English Language Education Study Program, and I'm from Offering Bay.
Okay.
So, I am as an Indonesian, and my native language is Japanese. I always speak Japanese with my family, my friends. And, when I first learned English when I was in elementary school, I have like when I say, how are you doing? Like a Medok accent. And I want to know, I being struggled to speak like a native. So my question is our brain and our tongues have enough capability to improve and make our English perfect like a native speaker, or even we never be able to speak like a native speaker? Is our brain have enough capability to do it? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We have to really think about, what does it mean to speak like a native? What is fluency? Now, most of us have an idea of perfect phonology, that to sound indistinguishable from a native speaker. And I'll be honest, the chances are you never will. Okay. There are a few people out there, there might be one or two in this room, who manage through just pure God-given talent to learn, even late in life, a language and master the phonology to such an extraordinary degree that they sound like native speakers. And I always want to punch those people personally. So jealous. But the 99.9% of us, if you begin studying a language past childhood, you're going to sound like where you're from. And the key thing is, that's okay. Your goal should be comprehensibility. If people from various places can easily understand you when you are speaking in the second language, that is the goal. You don't want to sound exactly like me. You want to sound like you because you are where you're from, and I hope you're proud of that. And essentially, we all have accents. I speak 2 American dialects myself. My native dialect. Give you an example. Like, okay, bye bye is said as, yeah, I'll come back now. Yeah. Everybody got that? Okay. that sort of dialectical difference is going to imprint itself on our speech. Now, in all other linguistic respects, there's a researcher named David Birdsong who pretty much made a career of exploring this question of can we get to native level in a second language? And all of his data said if the motivation is there, if someone is studying and particularly living in the foreign context, grammatically, vocabulary wise, everything except accent, he found clear evidence that lots and lots and lots of people reach a native-like ability. So don't worry so much about your accent. If people frequently are misunderstanding what you're saying, worry about your accent. If you can hold long conversations with people with no problem, but every time you talk to people, they say, oh, you have an interesting accent. Where are you from? Well, that's just your cue to talk about Indonesia, guys. So just be proud of where you're from. Own it. That's fine. You will sound like where you're from until the day you die. Okay. But that's a great thing.
Okay, thank you for the answers, Professor Clay. So once again, I just want to repeat what Mr. Clay has said to us. So concerning about the differences and varieties of accents in speaking English. So you are free to choose your own accent for speaking English. So you don't have to act just like what the foreigner speaks, the way how the foreigner speaks, just like American speaks. So you don't have to do something like that. Okay, it's amazing. Okay, now we go to the next question. Who wants to be the questioner? So yeah, please.
Okay, good afternoon, sir. My name is Trista Putri Maurineta. I'm majoring in English
Excuse me, would you like to speak louder?
Oh, okay. Hello, good afternoon, sir. My name is Trista Putri Maurineta.
From?
And I'm majoring in English language and literature from Offering Age.
Okay.
And I've been curious about this phenomenon for some time, and I noticed my friend who are speaking in another language also experiencing this. So whenever I switch into another language, my tone of voice sort of changed into whether it's higher or lower, whether it's softer or rougher. And I'm curious about is why does my tone always change whenever I switch into another language? Is there any specific explanation or scientific explanation for that phenomenon? Or does our brain have some kind of mechanism to automatically change our language? Thank you.
Okay.
I am willing to bet, you can nod yes or no. Do your mannerisms and even your personality change somewhat as well? Exactly. Now, this is actually a very common phenomenon, second language personalities. There's various explanations as to why this would be the case. Personally, I kind of suspect it's because, when we are thrust into a foreign language environment, we realize we have kind of the chance to remake ourselves, and we do so. And so oftentimes our basic personality, the way we come across in one language, may be very different from other languages. I speak several languages, and all but one of them, I'll save that one to the end, all but one of them, I actually sound and act somewhat differently. When I speak Spanish, I actually speak Spanish faster than I speak English. And I get super excited, and I use my hands way more. When I speak French, I'll just suffice to say that I speak very vulgar French. So, in English, I am very. My French teacher, when I came back from France, my French teacher complained about that. He said, "Who were you hanging out with?" You don't want to know. You don't want to know. But when I speak Japanese, I'm ultra polite and my voice drops down. Now, all of this has to do with who you're with the majority of the time when you're using the language, because you're picking up certain linguistic habits, but also how you want to be perceived by those people in that culture. Now, let me tell you the one little caveat to that I have discovered. And that is for me in Chinese. When I speak Chinese, I sound exactly like I do right now, yeah, albeit speaking in Chinese. I act pretty much the exact same way. Now, what's the difference between that and the other languages that I speak? Well, I speak Chinese at home. My wife is from Taiwan. You know, she does speak English. I do speak Chinese. Our home life is weird. Lots of language switching going on. But when we incorporate the language into more and more of real life, what happens is your language personality becomes much closer to who you are in your L1. When the language is held out and is only used in certain spheres. Now, I live in Japan, but I work in an English medium university, so everyone there speaks English. I speak, Chinese and English at home. My usual joke is, while I do speak Japanese, Japanese is my shopping language. Yeah, I go to the mall and I speak Japanese. But this means that Japanese does not really come into the home sphere at all. Yeah, house guests maybe, but I don't expose all of who I am to the Japanese language. And so it's kind of like holding it out at arm's distance. It's not getting that close. And so there is this distance between who I am and who I am when I'm speaking this other language. And all of us, I've heard, many hundreds of students say variants of the same thing. This is a very common phenomenon. But if at some point, for whatever reason, English really invades your personal life, so to speak, then you will notice that your Indonesian self and your English self will come together. If not, they will probably always be disparate. It's fine, it's good, but yeah, good for noticing that. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for the answers. Yeah, I think that's good enough. Focusing about the different culture we have when we learn about the language, English. So we just need to be ourselves. Yeah, we don't have to get influenced by. And two more questions, please. Yeah, you, or maybe someone there for the first time. Ada yang di sana tadi? No, nggak jadi. Okay. What's your name?
Good afternoon, sir. My
Yeah.
name is Rizky.
Rizky.
I'm from English Language Education, offering B. Okay, I'm sorry before maybe it out of the topic.
Okay.
I maybe it will be similar like health question. I want asking for strategy or tips about how to train our brain to be able to focus in English, such as in listening. Because I always get trouble when I start to study. As you know that Bahasa is our daily and first language. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, so, let me double check. So it's a matter of concentrating, like when you're hearing English. Yes? Okay. Honestly, I kind of feel like I'm the worst person in the world to answer this because my attention is always, I'm very bad at concentration myself. But here's the thing, like, number one, if you care, you'll concentrate. Think about the important conversations you have in life. That's where you're clued in. Like, if, say, if my wife comes up and I need to talk to you, what? And then she starts rattling off about, something that she bought that day. My attention is everywhere else because I don't care. But let's say, my son is sick. Well, she has my attention. Okay. Yeah. Caring is a lot of it. And you can actually manufacture caring. You can make yourself care. The other thing, now, this is a stupid little trick, but personally, this is something that I do. This is Dr. Clay's boring meeting strategy. Okay. When I'm at faculty meetings, I will listen to the speaker and mentally translate as if I'm doing simultaneous interpretation. The mental exercise is enough. It keeps me awake and keeps me focused on what they're saying. Try it, you might like it. Yeah, if it's already in a foreign language, going into your native language is easier, so it might not work as well. If you happen to speak a third language, go for that one. But it's all just a matter of being able to interest yourself in what is being said. And I know, depending on the topic, sometimes that gets hard. Hopefully today was fine. Hint, hint. But try the translation little game. Just make it a game, and it appeals to the childhood part and actually keeps you better engaged. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the answers. So, considering about the difficulties to understand about how English works in the brain of ours, so this one be translation can be one of the solutions for making you focus and get understanding better when trying to listening to somebody else. That's what has been said by Professor Clay. Okay, now we go to the last question because the time is limited. So one more question for Professor Clay. Yeah, please. Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is
Okay.
Dudari Putra. I'm from English Language and Education, offering A, sir. Yeah. And my question is, I see that you're able to speak multiple languages such as Spanish, Japanese, Chinese, etc. And personally, what's your tips for learning all those languages? Thank you.
My usual joke, particularly for learning Japanese, is the best way to learn Japanese is to be born to Japanese parents in Japan. That aside, yeah, well, there's the marry your way to fluency in a foreign language technique. You could say that's how I did Chinese. My wife always tries to take credit for my Chinese. No, I went to school. But so much of this really comes down to personal learning habits. And for my money, the most important thing that you can do is figure out how you learn. Now, the problem that you might face is if English happens to be the only foreign language you've ever seriously tackled, you might not remember because how many of you started English when you were in elementary school? Okay. Junior high people? This morning? Just checking. Now, if you start early, you literally forget how you got there. And even as a teacher, I find it to be very advantageous. I make myself study a new language just a little bit every 2 years so that I remember what it feels like at the beginning when you're, I don't understand anything. I don't want to lose that feeling because low-level learners are in that. Now, the way to go about learning a language, as I said, it is personal. In my case, things that I picked up by just trying multiple languages, I noticed, number one, that in the classroom environment, I was good at learning how to read and write. I was terrible at learning how to speak. The teacher would say, talk to your partner. And I'd turn to my partner and think, we both speak English. Why are we doing this? This is ridiculous. And my brain would reject it. And so of the 6 languages that I speak, put English aside, okay, 5 foreign languages, 4 of them required for me going to the country. Now, I had the opportunity to work in multiple places. So I am able to speak these languages because I had the opportunity to live and work in those places. But that is not necessary for everybody. I've known lots of people who can learn to speak just fine without ever traveling. More power to you. Particularly if you can have real interaction with people. Now, the 5th foreign language that I speak is Thai. It's not quite as advanced as the rest, but that one was actually my COVID hobby, so to speak. And I learned that entirely online with a teacher, but the key was every week we're just talking. And it's naturalistic conversation. And I know that my Thai teacher speaks English better than I speak Thai. She was an English major, just like y'all. Her English is great, but she will only speak Thai to me during the course of the lesson. And that was enough. So, if you have those conversational opportunities. Aside from that, think about your learning strategies. Are you a put sticky notes on the bathroom mirror person? Do you study lists of vocabulary? Figure out what vocabulary you need in a language. All of us have verbal tics, those things that we say all the time. Everybody laughs when I say this, but in the top 10, like first words that you learn in any language, yes, no, thank you, please, etc. I always have to put the word actually. I say this all the time. Actually. I know how to say that in everything. If you have these sorts of little verbal tics that you like to say all the time, learn that first, because then you're going to feel more comfortable when you're trying to speak because you have your go-to. So knowing yourself, how you learn, how you actually talk, take some time for introspection of who you are as a learner. And that actually lets you kind of jump ahead in terms of the learning. It seriously makes it easier when you are actually taking into account how you learn and what you want to learn. Okay? But at the end of the day, learning any language, it takes a long time. You're going to study a whole lot. There's a lot of memorization. Not all of it's going to be fun, but grab onto the conversations and those truly fun moments where you get to interact with people and express yourself, and you start to realize, hey, I'm doing this in a foreign language, because that's what makes it worthwhile, right? All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Professor Cliff, for the answers given to the questioners. Well, it has come to the end of the seminar session, so that's why before we close the seminar, let me try to make the conclusion about the presentation that has been done by Professor Gray. So language is symbolic. We need a representative thing to express about something about the language. This is the way how our brain works, processes about the language. And concerning about the second language acquisition, we cannot go directly to think about speaking English as the foreign language, but we need to use the first language to understand about English. And the first step to learn about the foreign language is by recognizing the sounds. In this case, we need to know how the sounds are made in the foreign language, like English, to be a good pronunciation. And having the difference about the pronunciation between the first and the second language, So you must be very happy because that is the way to break the phonetic boundaries to understand about the pronunciation of the foreign language that we learn. Well, I think so. This is the time to end. We thank you again to Professor Clay. Would you like to give applause to Professor Clay about the presentation? Hopefully that all the presentation and the explanations given by Professor Clay will be something useful for you, especially for studying to learn about English is the new students. Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, I send back to the MC. Come on. Thank you, Professor Clay.
Thank you for Professor Clay Williams for the amazing presentation for today's event.
And also, thank you for Dr. Ahmad Heki for an incredible session with our keynote speaker. All right, ladies and gentlemen, finally, we come to the end of today's agenda for Studium Generale 2023.
Thank you for all the participants who have come to participate and support this event. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to be the part of this remarkable event.
On behalf of the organizing committee, as the master of ceremony, I, Bima Wahyu, and my partner,
Adelia Andita,
kindly request your permission to take our leave.
We wish you all safe travels and continued success in your endeavors. Enjoy the rest of your session and thank you for being the part of Studium Generale 2023.
Thank you and see you next time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. The same. Friday. Yeah. To discuss that with y'all and find out the details. We would like to contact you again. Yeah, it's basically, you know, the key for Friday is just like they listed several topics, but like a research presentation. Okay, so